Adam, it's nice to see you on Zoom. Spring football is over, but the news has not stopped with the University of Colorado football. And I don't know if it'll ever stop, but it's certainly been in full force this week. The transfer portal, we knew this was coming. Deion Sanders has told us many times that, this is going to happen. He told us actually Saturday after the spring game, this is coming. It's amazing to me. I mean, it has taken off nationally, just the sheer numbers of the amount of guys that are in the transfer portal. What's your take on what's gone on this week?
Yeah, you know something's going to come and you try to prepare for it as best as you can, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of late December where it's just really tough to keep on top of everything. And you report numbers in terms of number of guys that are going out, how many scholarships are open, and that number just keeps changing. And it's been an interesting time to cover the Colorado Buffaloes, that's for sure. But like you said, this is something that Coach Prime has said was going to happen literally every time we've spoken with him since he was introduced as the head coach in Boulder. I don't know how he could have possibly made it any clearer. I mean, he would have had to get like a megaphone and drive around the streets of Boulder announcing it. Because I'm thinking back. I think we've had 7 opportunities to talk to Coach Prime in person since he got the job. And this is something he said every single time. And sometimes he says it when he's not even asked specifically about it. That's how upfront he's been about this. But when you look at that number, and I'm hesitant to even put any numbers out there right now because by the time this video goes live, it might look a little differently. But at this point, it's 49 that have left the program since the end of last season. That number is what kind of is shocking. Not necessarily that it happened, but just that it hasn't happened anywhere around Boulder, Colorado in terms of college football turnover. But I don't know if nationally you've ever seen a roster get turned over quite this much. I guess the closest thing to compare would be what Deion Sanders did at Jackson State when he got there, right?
Yeah.
It was a pretty similar roster overhaul. So we expected this, and the analytical football reporter side of me says that, this is Coach Prime's prerogative. There's a new NCAA rule that says a first-year head coach gets to do this. Now, those players can stay on scholarship for the academic side if they want to, but you saw Lincoln Riley do it at USC last year, maybe not quite to this scale in terms of the number, but this is allowed, and this is something that Coach Prime from his first meeting with this team has said is going to happen. So that analytical side says these guys should have seen the writing on the wall if they didn't. But then there's the human side, Brian, where we know these guys, Travis Gray, Deion Smith. These are some of my favorite people that I've covered at Colorado. So that part of it, it's hard to stomach. And I'm sure this has been a wide range of emotions for diehard Colorado fans because they've formed an attachment, even though this football team went 1-11, ranked dead last out of 131 FBS programs in scoring margin. You still have a soft spot in your heart for a lot of these guys. And you followed their story from their high school to their development at Colorado. And now just overnight, you've got 49 guys that are leaving the program. And again, by the time this video goes live, maybe it's even a few more than that. So it's hard to wrap your head around it, even though, mentally we've been kind of preparing for this. I remember, Brian, after the spring game on Saturday, we were talking about the fact that we're not going to get a chance to relax. We knew this was coming, that there was going to be a lot of movement. What about you?
Yeah, and I go back to, I've referenced this before because it's the only time I've really been one-on-one with Deion, but in Atlanta, he and I were riding on the bus back from practice to the hotel the day before the game, and we're talking about all this stuff, and he's talking to me about all the numbers, and I said, "Do you really think you can change the roster that much in 1 year?" And he looks at me and he goes, "I had 70 new players my first year at Jackson State." I was like, "Okay," but I still thought he's not going to have 70 new guys here in Colorado. Well, he's going to have 70 to 75 new scholarship players plus some walk-ons, so 80 plus new players if you count walk-ons. And it's amazing. And I look at it a couple different ways, and you mentioned the human side of it, and I want to touch on that first because a lot of people since Deion got hired have said to us separately, or a couple times you and I've been together, that they said, "I'm so happy for you guys. You get to cover Coach Prime, all this stuff." Well, it's very different for us, and one of the things that the losing was not fun to cover, but I think one of the best parts about covering Colorado football that people don't understand is CU Sports Info staff did a really great job with giving us access over the years, and you and I got to know these people. You get to know these coaches and know these players, probably more so than at a lot of other programs, because we got a lot of one-on-one time with these people. I ran into Deion Smith last Friday and just chatted with him, not an interview, but chat with him a little bit. And I actually said to him, "It looks like you're one of the guys they like." And he goes, "Yeah, I think so." And here he is going out, and like, this is a guy that spent 5 years at the University of Colorado, has 1 year left. He gave everything he has. Deion's one of my favorite guys. Montana Lamonius Craig, guys like that. Travis Gray, I got to know him, starting in high school when he's working out at 6-0 down with Matt McChesney. These are people that you get to know for a long time. And so there is that part, and it stinks. As far as the national perception right now, Adam, that, Deion's getting attacked nationally. And I think that it's really, to me, it's kind of the perfect storm of a lot of different things. Number one, you're 1-11 last year, and this had to happen, right? You had to change the roster. Number two, there's new rules in place that allow a massive overhaul like this. It wasn't, a year or two ago that you could only really bring in about 25 new guys. There's no way Deion could have done this a year or two ago. And so the sheer numbers of this are just insane because nobody's ever seen it. And I believe, guys like Lincoln Riley, Nick Saban, whatever, they would do the same thing if they took over a team like this. Lincoln didn't have to last year because he already had a bunch of really good players on USC's roster. CU, frankly, did not have a bunch of really good players on this roster, and there was more overhaul needed. So I think it's a little unfair the way he's being blasted, and because I think a lot of what he's doing is probably done around the country. It's just being done on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, and I think as this plays out a little bit, too, it's going to become clear for folks that don't really know these names of guys that are hitting the portal. And Brian, I don't mean to say this to be mean, but there's not going to be a whole lot of these guys that are going to end up at other Power 5 programs, right?
Yeah.
Montana Lamonius Craig, Nico Reed, probably, maybe an Aubrey Smith, but
Jordan Tyson,
absolutely 100%. But I was asked to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the impact of these guys hitting the portal, 1 having no impact at all, and 5 being a transfer that really hurts the program. There were a lot of 1s and 2s on that list. And again, It wasn't trying to be mean towards those players. It was just trying to be analytical about it. And we were there covering this team that went 1-11 last year, and you saw how far away they were. There were times that it was a miracle for them to get a couple first downs. So such a long ways to go for them to get this program up to the standards of Coach Prime. And you keep going back to the emotional side of it. And gosh, I wish this guy was still around CU, and it's sad to see him have to leave after putting in all that work there. But you keep going back to the fact that maybe some of these guys would have helped from a depth standpoint, but outside of Montana Lamonius Craig, in Jordan Tyson, if he was healthy, there just weren't guys that are here in the portal right now that would have been starters on this team in this fall. So this is giving Coach Prime and his staff an opportunity to bring in guys. And also, Brian, I think if you had too many returning players, there was going to be a faction in the locker room. Whereas now with so many new faces, that's almost kind of a bonding experience in and of itself. We've heard from a couple transfers, like Jordan Dominica, I believe, was one of them that said, the transfers are clicking really fast because we've gone through the same thing. Whereas guys that had been around for a couple, 3 years, I don't know if you can have too much of that lingering around in your locker room if you're really trying to hit reset on this thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because generally, when we've seen transfers come in, it's how will those transfers be received by the new guys, because they're the outsiders. The old guys are the outsiders at this point. There's going to be, we mentioned there's as we're doing this, and who knows if the number goes down as we're doing this, but it's 14 scholarship guys that are slated to be back for next year's team. And, I don't want to mention names, but there's probably probably two or three more that you and I would be surprised that they're not hitting the portal list here in the next few days. So it might be around 10. So out of 85, when only 10 newcomer or returners are back, that's an insane number. But yeah, and I agree with you. Most of these guys are maybe not starters, but like even a guy like Jalen Sami, they need about five or six defensive tackles. Are they going to find 5 or 6 defensive tackles in the portal better than Jalen Sami or even Naeem Rodman? That's my biggest question right now, because I think Jalen Sami, I don't know what you think, but I think a guy like that has NFL potential and, could be a really good player with, playing a normal amount of snaps for a nose tackle. CU needed him to play a lot of snaps, but if he's a 25 snap guy somewhere, maybe he's more impactful and, gets an NFL shot. I think that's the caliber for him. But I think that's my biggest question with all of this is that's a lot of spots to fill now for Coach Prime and his staff. And can they find guys that are better than everybody that they're letting go?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is a situation where if you look it up more on a macro scale in terms of the number of these 25-ish players that come in, I would think without question that group of 25 players is going to be better than the last 25 players to hit the portal from Colorado, right?
As a group, yeah.
As a group. Now, micro sense, yeah, you might go in there and a couple of these guys go somewhere else and have a big impact. And you'll nitpick it from that standpoint. But I think the overall collection of talent is going to be a lot bigger in that group overall. And you've also got to look at it that, Sal Sunseri had 15 spring practices with Jalen Sami. Something didn't mesh there to where that relationship was going to go forward. And again, this new NCAA rule that I think last year was the first year it was in place allows for new staffs to do this. And it's cutthroat and it's hard to stomach at times, but you kind of have to let this staff get the guys that are going to mesh with their style. Sal Sunseri has a very old school approach. And if that just was not working with Jalen Sami this spring, then he's got the right with this rule to make those changes. Yeah.
And I think to me, that's the biggest question mark though, is what actually comes in, because I have heard, people say that there's not a ton of talent, Power 5 type talent in the portal. There's a ton of names, but not a ton of talent. What's your perception as people you've talked to, do you think that there's enough talent out there and that Deion can bring in enough?
Again, with that number being a little bit fluid, that's a lot of players. That's a lot. So I think it's going to be hard to fill out that entire roster with quality guys based on what we hear in terms of how shallow the talent pool is. But there's guys out there, again, with the whole group together that are going to be really good players that they bring in. Alton McCaskill, the fourth from Houston, had a big true freshman campaign back in 2021, what was dealing with an injury last year. Cam Robertson from North Texas is a big body. He was on campus for an official visit, was Conference USA all-freshman team selection. Jaquez Robinson is a big cornerback that Charles Kelly knows, is very familiar with from his time in Tuscaloosa, and I think they have a decent chance at him. So there's guys that people are going to be really excited about. But when you talk about that whole 25, I think there's obviously going to have to be some sleepers in there for sure.
Yeah, no question. And I think one of the biggest questions I've gotten, and probably that I have as well, is how do you mesh 75 new players to win football games over the summer? Now, it's one thing, you had 15 practices with a bunch of these guys, and you already knew there was going to be a bunch of high school kids that were committed that are signed that aren't here yet, things like that. But now 25 other players, there's going to be like 40 new guys that arrive this summer, and they have a little bit of time with them in the summer, but now you're talking fall camp. How do they get these guys to mesh to where they can win football games?
I mean, the good thing is their schedule's not very challenging, so they can just kind of ease into it, right?
Right. Yeah. At least you got a bunch of patsies early on, right?
I don't know, Brian. That's why they pay those guys more money than we get paid, I guess, is because they're tasked with getting those guys ready in a very short period of time. It's tough to implement an up-tempo scheme, and that's what they're trying to do offensively, and yeah, defensively, there's going to be so many different pieces. I don't know. That is the big concern, I think, more so than anything, is how quickly you can get it to mesh. But I think they've taken the approach that let's just get the most talent in right now, and then try our best this summer. Is how I would imagine they're going about it.
Yeah, I feel like this year's Colorado team is going to be a science experiment of all the new NCAA rules all at once. It's the transfer portal is open more so than ever. It's the rule about you can add more than the 25 guys. It's the coaches exemption where you can get rid of players. It's NIL, all this stuff, and it's all meshing into like they're a science experiment for all those things at one time. And can you actually build a team in one off season through the portal? And I actually tweeted out this earlier, but they might have 75 new scholarship guys. Just as recently as a couple years ago, by rule, that's 3 full recruiting classes in one off season.
Well, it reminds me of that line, be careful what you wish for, because the players, I think, justifiably wanted more. They should have had more freedom of movement, because these coaches were leaving year after year, and the players were having to sit out a year if they wanted to transfer somewhere else. It wasn't fair, no question. I think by and large the transfer portal is probably a good thing, but there's the other side of it, Brian, where you can get stuck in that portal, or now, as we see, especially with the first-year head coach, you can just get flat out cut. And so there is the other side of it that has come with this portal that was supposed to be for player freedom, and now is having some negative ramifications for them.
Yeah, and it's actually something that I thought years ago, a couple years ago, like the players are fighting all this stuff, and I didn't love all the changes coming, but I thought, man, the players might regret some of this stuff, and this is the downside. The players fought for a lot of this freedom, and it's more business-like than it ever was before, and it's because of frankly, players pushing it. Not necessarily these players that are currently here, but players that came before them have pushed for this, and this is the downside. It is much more business than it ever used to be, and frankly, I think there was a quote in an article by The Athletic earlier today. By one of the CU players, he said, Deion's a businessman. Well, that's what he is. That's what he's been most of his at least his post-playing career life is. He's been a businessman, and this is a business to him. And he was on the Pat McAfee show earlier today, and he mentioned he had a comment. He said, "What businesses is there a change of ownership where there's not massive change like this?" And he equated it to a business, and so that's what it is.
And he's so transparent about it too.
Yes.
Is the other thing. It's I was almost surprised when he caught himself. Brian, you asked him if anything has surprised him since he took over as a head coach, and he kind of paused for a second and says, "Yes, a lot, but I can't answer that." And on to the next question.
Yeah.
I don't think you had to speculate too much on that, right? I mean, it's a question of it's an issue where he came in and the talent wasn't even up to the level that he thought it was. I think it's pretty clear that's the case. And so now, it's become business decisions that he's been very upfront about. And again, your heart breaks for some of these individual players that, they didn't want to leave, and that stinks. But that's the new college football. And again, I wish we could go back in the time machine, Brian, to, the college football that we grew up on on a lot of levels. But that's never going to happen. This is the way it's going to be going forward. There's no way you're going to put that toothpaste back in the tube. So either adapt, or you're just going to continually be frustrated as a college football fan. Yeah,
and it just the way it is with this college football right now, and with this, and I think one of the things that is just as shocking to people is the transparency of Deion. You not only have never had a coach with this much turnover, but coaches don't come out and say it. They don't come out and say, yeah, we're going to get rid of all these guys, and this is what we're going to do. They just kind of subtly do it, right? And they say, well, we're getting our guys in. Well, this has just been flat out transparent that I don't think people really understand how to react to it. And people, I'm saying myself as well, like it's just been like, wow, this is, in some ways it's refreshing. In some ways it's it hits you hard, right? When
Yeah.
some of these comments come out, again, on the Pat McAfee show, he said, I can't bring in new furniture to this beautiful house if I don't get rid of the old furniture. Well, that hits hard when,
Yeah.
it sounds like, you're equating humans to furniture,
Yeah.
it's an analogy. I get it, but, that hits hard to some people. And so it's the transparency and the bluntness of it that people are like, whoa, this is kind of different.
And there's coaching staffs that are speaking like that behind closed doors, but yeah, they're not doing it in the media. So there's a reason that Deion Sanders gets so many eyeballs on what he's doing, because he is so transparent. He's dynamic, but then there's going to be that crowd. We've seen Colorado has way more haters than they've ever had before. And a lot of people that, are trolling our message boards and are out there on Twitter just with disgusting stuff, frankly. But overall, again, going back to the macro, Colorado just sold out their spring game. They were televised on ESPN. So that attention is by and large a good thing. And you're just going to have to deal with some of the negative byproducts as a result of all that attention that you are getting.
Yeah, and I think one of those byproducts is, we talk about the schedule stuff, and trying to mesh all these things, but Deion's actions and just his personality and his transparency, it puts a bullseye on CU that in past, especially last year, was kind of like, all right, CU, whatever, let's get through this game and get to the next one. Everybody's going to want to beat CU this year. All those haters you mentioned, right? And so these teams are going to come at it. These head coaches are not going to want to lose to Deion Sanders.
There are so many schools that I would imagine would shy away from hiring Coach Prime because they don't want that attention.
Yeah.
But Colorado football had become so irrelevant. This is great for the program. Not every story is going to be positive, and not every story you'd want out there, but generally it's a good thing. And we would have never imagined sitting down doing this long of a video talking about transfers in and out of the program, 3-4 months ago. So it's a whole new world, but that's why Colorado was the right fit for Coach Prime to further his coaching career at.
Yeah, and it's amazing. When you and I had the idea, let's do a video like this, after spring ball, I think we sort of, I don't know about you, but I was sort of thinking we'll talk about each of the guys that are leaving the program. Well, that's because that number was about 13 or 15 at the time. And it's literally, since the portal opened on April 15th, 39 players, at least as I haven't checked Twitter while I've been doing this, so it's maybe more than that, but at least 39 players, including 2 that he brought in January, have left this program since the portal opened on April 15th, which there's no way we can sit there and talk about this. I'll run out of time on my Zoom here if we do that, but it is insane. And I know you and I are going to be back as they start adding people. We're going to talk more about some of those guys. But as we kind of wrap this up, is there anything else that we need to wrap up with here?
Give it 5 minutes and we'll have to hop back on for another video. That's how news seems to be happening with roster personnel at Colorado. But no, I think the narrative is going to shift quite a bit, because there might be a couple more guys hitting the portal, but generally that's gonna die down here, and then they're gonna start getting commitments, and the focus will largely be on that. And it's just the way of the world. People overreact, and then they kind of, it's like the saying, there's 2 sides of a story and the truth somewhere in the middle. Well, like with all of this crazy energy going on both sides of it, we're going to get back into a nice lane here eventually when things slow down a little bit. I feel like.
Well, that is part of the panic on CU fans' part. If there's not a whole lot of panic, there's a lot of like, hey, this is what needs to happen. We're excited about all this, but the panic comes from all the names being shown out the door, and there's not anybody coming in right now, but those people are coming in, and so
they're coming in. I don't know the timing on that, but Colorado fans will certainly have their patience tested until those 25 spots are filled up. But I would probably suggest they take a big deep breath, because it's going to be okay based on everything I'm hearing.
Their patience has been tested quite a bit over the last 15 years or so. So this is probably not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I guess I can't really ask Colorado fans to be patient anymore, but just take some deep breaths.
Yeah, take some deep breaths. it'll be a ride, and we'll get through it. And Adam, we'll be back at some point soon. I know your biggest stress right now is getting your Celtics through the first round of the playoffs, but we'll be back at some point to talk more basketball, and wish you and the Celtics luck.
Thank you. Yeah, Trae Young, I'm not a big fan of his right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep.